She had tried everything, different soil, different pots, different corners of the garden. She had followed every instruction she could find, spent money on fertilizers she could barely pronounce, and stood over her rose plants with the kind of desperate attention usually reserved for sick children. And every single time, the same result. Weak stems, yellowing leaves, flowers that bloomed once, briefly, like they were apologizing, and then never came back. She was about to give up entirely when an old man in her neighborhood, who had roses climbing every wall of his house in colors so vivid they looked painted, leaned over his fence and said, "You are not growing roses wrong. You just don't know their secrets yet." That sentence changed everything, because roses are not difficult plants. They are misunderstood plants. And there's a profound difference between those two things. The people who grow roses that stop traffic, roses that bloom in waves all season, roses so healthy they look like they belong in a royal garden. Those people are not doing more work than everyone else. They are doing different work. They know things that most casual gardeners were never taught, things that nurseries don't print on the little plastic tag that comes with the plant. Things passed down between serious growers in quiet conversations, the way trade secrets move, slowly, selectively, and only when someone is ready to listen. So let's go through them. Not as a checklist, not as a set of instructions, but as a way of genuinely understanding what a rose plant needs to become extraordinary. Because once you understand the why behind each secret, you will never look at your garden the same way again. The first thing most people get completely wrong is where they plant their rose. They find a beautiful spot, a place that looks right, and they dig a hole. What they do not do is observe that spot across a full day. Roses need a minimum of 6 hours of direct sunlight, and not just any 6 hours. Morning sunlight is different from afternoon. Sunlight, and for roses, the distinction matters enormously. Morning sun dries the dew off the leaves quickly, which is one of the most powerful things you can do to prevent fungal disease. Roses that sit in wet foliage for hours after sunrise are constantly fighting off black spot, powdery mildew, and a range of other infections that drain their energy and ruin their appearance. Afternoon sun, in very hot climates, on the other hand, can scorch petals and stress the plant during its most vulnerable hours. The ideal position for a rose is one where it catches strong morning light from the east and gets some gentle shade or filtered light in the most brutal part of the afternoon. This single adjustment, choosing location not by aesthetic but by sun pattern, is responsible for more gardening transformations than almost anything else. Now, the soil. And here is where the gap between ordinary rose growers and extraordinary ones becomes very visible. Most people plant roses in whatever soil their garden already has, maybe mixing in a bag of compost and calling it done. But roses have a specific relationship with soil that goes beyond just nutrients. They need soil that drains well and holds moisture at the same time. Which sounds contradictory until you understand what it actually means. A heavy clay soil holds water so well that the roots drown in it. Root rot is silent, invisible, and fatal. The plant above the ground looks like it is struggling for no reason, thinning out, dropping leaves, refusing to bloom, and the whole time, the roots below are slowly dying in waterlogged soil. Sandy soil has the opposite problem. Water drains through it so fast that the roots can barely absorb what they need before it is gone. The ideal rose soil is what gardeners call loamy, a blend of sand, silt, and organic matter that holds moisture like a sponge but never becomes waterlogged. The secret that experienced growers use is simple but transformative. They dig their planting hole deeper than necessary, fill the bottom with a mix of coarse sand and aged compost, and build the soil up from there. They are engineering the drainage before the plant ever goes in. That preparation, invisible once the plant is in the ground, is often what separates a struggling rose from a thriving one. The pH of the soil is something almost no one checks, but rose experts check it religiously. Roses prefer a slightly acidic soil, somewhere between 6.0 and 6.5 on the pH scale. If the soil is too alkaline, the plant cannot absorb iron and manganese properly, no matter how much fertilizer you add. The leaves turn yellow between the veins, a condition called chlorosis, and the plant looks starved even when it is surrounded by nutrients. The fix is simple once you know the cause. A small amount of sulfur worked into the soil will bring the pH down. Coffee grounds added to the base of the plant over time have a mild acidifying effect. This is not complicated chemistry. It is just knowing that a number you cannot see with the naked eye controls whether your rose can access the food you are giving it. Let us talk about watering, because almost everyone does this wrong. And the consequences of wrong watering are more severe for roses than for almost any other garden plant. The instinct is to water frequently and lightly, to keep the soil consistently moist, to never let it dry out. That instinct produces shallow roots. When you water a little every day, the roots have no reason to grow downward. They stay near the surface, following the moisture. And shallow-rooted roses are fragile roses. They wilt in heat, They suffer in drought. They are easily stressed. The secret is to water deeply and infrequently. Give the plant a thorough, slow soaking, enough water that it penetrates 30 to 40 centimeters into the soil, and then wait. Wait until the top few centimeters of soil are dry before watering again. This trains the roots to reach downward, chasing the moisture deeper into the earth. Deep-rooted roses are tough, resilient, and capable of surviving conditions that would destroy a shallow-rooted plant. Equally important is where the water lands. Water on the leaves is an invitation to disease. Every serious rose grower waters at the base, directing the water to the soil and roots, keeping the foliage dry. A soaker hose laid around the base of the plant is one of the most practical investments a rose grower can make. It delivers water exactly where it is needed and nowhere it is not. Feeding roses is where a lot of well-meaning gardeners actually cause harm. They fertilize enthusiastically and often using nitrogen-heavy products because nitrogen makes plants grow fast and green. And the rose responds. It pushes out lush, dark, abundant foliage. But that soft, fast-grown foliage is exactly what pests and diseases love most. Aphids colonize it. Black spot spreads through it. And all that energy going into leaves means less energy going into blooms. The secret to feeding roses for maximum flowering is balance, a fertilizer with roughly equal parts nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium during the growing season, with an emphasis shifting toward phosphorus and potassium as bloom time approaches. Phosphorus drives root development and flower production. Potassium strengthens cell walls and improves disease resistance. Banana peels buried shallowly at the base of a rose plant are a folk remedy that actually has science behind it. They decompose into potassium-rich matter that feeds the plant slowly over weeks. Bone meal worked into the planting hole provides phosphorus for months. These are not substitutes for a good balanced fertilizer, but they are the kind of layered, thoughtful feeding that separates a rose that blooms occasionally from one that blooms continuously. Pruning is the secret that intimidates people the most, and also the one that makes the biggest visible difference. Many gardeners prune timidly, cutting a little here and there, nervous about taking too much. But roses respond to bold pruning the way athletes respond to intense training. They come back stronger, more vigorous, and more productive. The key is understanding what you are cutting and why. Dead wood, which appears gray or brown and does not flex, must be removed entirely. It is not dormant, it is dead, and it is taking up space and inviting disease. Crossing branches that rub against each other should be removed because that friction creates wounds where disease enters. And when you cut, always cut at a 45-degree angle just above an outward-facing bud. The angle allows water to run off rather than sitting on the cut. And the outward-facing direction ensures the new growth opens the plant up rather than crowding its center. An open center with air moving freely through. The plant is one of the most powerful defenses against fungal disease that exists. Deadheading, the removal of spent blooms, is the secret that keeps repeat flowering roses blooming all season. When a rose finishes flowering and you leave the spent head on the plant's energy shifts toward producing seeds. That is its biological goal. Reproduction. Once it feels it has accomplished that, it has no urgency to produce more flowers. The moment you remove that spent bloom before the hip forms, you interrupt that cycle. The plant has not completed its reproductive goal, and it responds by producing another bloom, and then another in a continuous effort to set seed that you keep gently overriding. Deadheaded roses that are also fed and watered correctly will bloom in waves that can last from late spring to first frost. And then there's the secret that is perhaps the most unexpected, the one that even experienced gardeners sometimes overlook. Okay, companion planting. Roses grown in isolation, surrounded only by bare soil or mulch, are lonely in a way that has real biological consequences. They are more vulnerable to pests and diseases, less supported by the soil ecosystem. But roses planted alongside garlic repel aphids, because aphids find the sulfur compounds that garlic releases deeply unpleasant. Lavender planted nearby attracts pollinators and repels certain beetles. Marigolds planted at the base of rose bushes have been shown to deter nematodes in the soil that damage roots. These combinations are not superstition. They are ecology. They are the gardener working with the living system instead of against it. The old man with roses climbing every wall of his house understood all of this, not because he had read more books than his neighbors, but because he had paid attention over many years to what his plants were telling him. A yellowing leaf is communication. A weak stem is a question. A rose that blooms once and never again is asking for something it has not yet been given. The secret to growing roses that are extraordinary is not a single technique or a magic product. It is the willingness to stop treating the plant as decoration and start treating it as a living thing with specific needs, specific preferences, and a specific language, one that, once you learn it, makes every season in the garden feel like a conversation.